The story of the Good Samaritan. Lesson 10. First week. Background reading. Leviticus 19 verse 18. 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Proverbs 14 verse 20. 20. The poor are shunned even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends. Matthew 19 verse 19. 19. Honor your father and mother. And love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22 verse 39. 39. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Mark 12 verse 31. 31. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Luke 6 verse 27. 27. But to you who are listening I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Luke 10 verses 29 to 37. 29. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? 30. In reply Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. 31. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. 32. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. 33. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. 34. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. 35. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. 36. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? 37. The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Romans 12 verse 10. 10. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Galatians 5 verse 14. 14. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Devotional reading. John 4 verses 5 to 29. 5. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. 6. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. 7. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? 8. His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. 9. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. 10. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. 11. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? 12. Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? 13. Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. 14. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. 15. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. 16. He told her, go, call your husband and come back. 17. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. 18. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. 19. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. 20. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." 21 Woman, Jesus replied, "Believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." 22 You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. 23 Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. 24 God is Spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. 25 The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." 26 Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." 27 Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" 28 Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, 29 Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? Central verse. And he must needs go through Samaria. John 4 verse 4. KJV. He had to go through Samaria on the way. John 4 verse 4. NLT. Key terms. Mixed breed. Made up of or involving individuals or items of more than one kind. Made up of or involving persons differing in race, national origin, religion, or class. Samaritan. A native or inhabitant of Samaria, a person who is generous in helping those in distress. Introduction. A good Samaritan is one who voluntarily renders aid to another in distress, although under no duty to do so. He is a person who has compassion, concern, and is willing to do something about situations that is not their obligation. He is a person who will go out of his way to help someone in need. He will use his gifts, influence, and resources to help someone who needs help. He is what the world calls a good neighbor. Jesus expects every believer to be a good neighbor. He is the perfect example for believers to follow. He showed himself to be a good neighbor, a friend, and certainly a good Samaritan. The world would be a much better place to live in if it had more good Samaritans walking around. Jesus emphasized that the greatest commandment was that believers love one another, do good to those who have not done good to them. Love those who have not shown you any love. It's up to each believer to be an example of love to everyone he meets, for it's with love and kindness that the believer can draw others. Discussion. Jesus was an exceptionally good teacher of everything that he taught his disciples about. He and his disciples were walking along together as they normally did when he told them that he needed to go to Samaria. Samaria was not a city that many Jews took time to go through. Normally they detoured around the city because the Jews and the Samaritans were not on good speaking terms. The Samaritans were a group of people in the Bible who were mixed, half Jews and half Gentiles. They were the survivors of the Assyrians' conquest and Babylonia. They survived through the time of Jesus until this present day. The northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrians, who took many of the people of Israel as captives, but some stayed and intermarried with foreigners who was left there by the Assyrians. According to Webster's dictionary, the Samaritan were first mentioned in the Bible in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah in the 5th century BC. At that point, Babylon had given way to the Persian Empire. Nehemiah, a Jew, gained favor with the king and was able to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. However, the Samaritans remained in the land, opposed the rebuilding efforts, and caused problems for Nehemiah and his fellow workers. Nehemiah 6 verses 1 to 14. This was the beginning of the long-lasting hatred between the Jews and the Samaritans. There are many church members today who do not believe that different races of people ought to marry. They do like the people who lived on this earth during Jesus' time. They discriminate against those who are not of their race. But as many as are led by God, they are the sons of God. The parable of the Good Samaritan has many lessons that the believer can learn some positive things from. A Samaritan was traveling by and saw the man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, who had been attacked by robbers, stripped of his clothes, beat, and left for dead. A priest saw him, but passed by him on the other side. A Levite saw him, but he too passed by on the other side. But the Samaritan stopped, took pity on him, bandaged up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine. He put the man on his donkey and took him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper and told him to look after him, and when he returned that he would reimburse him of any extra expenses that he may incur. Luke 10 verses 30 to 35. Jesus asked the question, which one was the neighbor? The man answered Jesus that the one who stopped and showed mercy. Jesus told him to do likewise. The word of the Lord says that if you see your brother in need and have this world's good and shut up your bowels of compassion, how dwells the love of God? 1 John 3 verse 17. Anyone who does the will of God can be your neighbor, for a neighbor is a person who lives next door or near to a person referred to. He can live away from you a great distance, but if he's there for you in your time of need, he can be your neighbor. Conclusion. What can the believer learn from the story of the Good Samaritan? The fact that God so loved the entire world that he sent Jesus to die for all who would receive him. This lesson lets the believers know that God is of no respecter of persons, and they can see that Jesus cared about people of mixed blood. He loved those who were hated by others. This lesson lets the believers know that God is the God of all flesh, and he does not exclude any race of people, for he is not influenced by the opinions of others. The believer must try to be like Jesus and remember that from one blood, God made all nations and his love reaches all people. Others may criticize your actions and love toward others who are not just like you, but it is the believer's responsibility to show love to everyone, just as Jesus showed love to the woman at the well. The woman that Jesus met at the well was an outcast to some people, but Jesus saw her as a neighbor. He said that he had a need to go through Samaria, but what he really was doing was going to see about the woman's need. Sometimes believers must go out of their way to meet the needs of someone else and become that Good Samaritan. In the long run, he becomes the winner. Questions. Devotional reading. Why did Jesus tell the story of the Good Samaritan? How can this story help you as an individual? Why was there so much hatred between the Jews and the Samaritans? What can you do to help the race situation? Essential thought. When you meet the needs of others, you really meet a need of your own. Thank you for listening, and to God be the glory.